US Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Russian Federation Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov met on the sidelines of the ASEAN summit in Kuala Lumpur. This is the second meeting between the heads of the diplomatic departments of the United States and the Russian Federation, and the first since US. President Donald Trump criticized his Russian counterpart Putin after realizing that the Russian leader has no intention of ending the Russo-Ukrainian war that, as we all remember, the President of the United States had promised to end within 24 hours. Well, fine, within 48. The disappointment that Trump failed to achieve anything from Putin was obvious even after the negotiations between the Russian Federation's Minister of Foreign Affairs and the US Secretary of State. Marco Rubio did not hide the fact that he was unable to achieve anything concrete from Lavrov, although he described the meeting with the head of the Russian Foreign Ministry as frank and honest. The United States Secretary of State spoke about Donald Trump's disappointment over the lack of progress in ending the Russian-Ukrainian war, but reported that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation had proposed to him a new, different approach to the war. Rubio did not explicitly specify exactly what this particular approach should comprehensively be, or indeed whether it would ultimately lead to any truly quick or immediate solutions. However, he strongly emphasized that such an approach does not in any way promise a swift or rapid peace either. However, he also intends to convey this concept proposed by the Russian Federation to Donald Trump. However, in my opinion, this new and different approach proposed by Sergey Lavrov may be aimed, firstly, at somehow calming the situation after Donald Trump was openly offended by Putin, and secondly, at moving towards the important Russian goal of buying time under the guise of a simulated negotiation process, while at the same time continuing strikes on Ukraine and the advance of Russian troops on Ukrainian positions. Rubio, by the way, was also forced to answer questions about halting arms supplies to Ukraine, but he said that the United States has not made any such political decision and that it is solely a matter of the American leadership trying to understand exactly what types of weaponry are currently available in US military stockpiles. And we all understand perfectly well that it is precisely the Russian side that is interested in ensuring that even after Donald Trump announced the resumption of arms supplies to Ukraine, this resumption would not involve any large or significant deliveries, but would be limited to microscopic amounts. Well, for example, so that the number of Patriot missiles would not exceed 10, thus allowing the Russians to continue their missile attacks on Ukrainian cities and towns over the coming weeks and months. In the official statement of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, there is not a single word about any new or different approaches to ending the Russian-Ukrainian war. It is obvious that Sergey Lavrov himself was not particularly concerned about this, and it was only connected to his desire to cloud the mind of his American counterpart. Instead, the Russian press release highlights as an important task the restoration of direct air travel between the Russian Federation and the United States, as well as the resumption of normal operations of the diplomatic missions of both countries. This is what truly interests the Kremlin. It needs the embassy of the Russian Federation in the United States and other diplomatic missions of that country in America to continue operating so that as many agents as possible from the Russian Federal Security Service and the Russian Foreign Intelligence Service can be sent on assignment. As is well known, these agents are dispatched to Western countries under the guise of diplomats, where they can organize sabotage against hostile countries much more professionally and efficiently on the ground, as well as obtain important secret information about the United States military-industrial complex. Considering that Russia is now actively preparing for confrontation with the West, which could even lead to military action, such information is indeed crucial for Putin and his inner circle. And of course, the restoration of direct air travel. Here, one could say that Putin is already fulfilling the wishes of those who share their money with him, the Russian oligarch, who simply find it inconvenient to be without direct air travel to America and who are obviously pressuring the Kremlin so that the Russian political leadership at least negotiates this with Donald Trump. The fact that for the normal functioning of embassies and the restoration of direct air travel, at least some progress is needed in resolving the issues related to ending the Russian-Ukrainian war, does not concern Putin at all. It is obvious that he, as before, hopes that sooner or later Trump will realize the futility of his attempts to end the war on the Russian-Ukrainian front and will focus on restoring Russian-American relations without any concessions from Putin, specifically regarding the issue of ending the war with Ukraine. At the very least, this is the policy the Russian president has chosen since his very first conversations with the President of the United States. And it was precisely this course that the Minister of Foreign Affairs of the Russian Federation, Sergey Lavrov, adhered to during his initial negotiations with Marco Rubio, which, as is known, took place in the presence of the Russian president's aide on foreign policy, Yuri Ushakov. By the way, he has much more influence within Putin's inner circle than Lavrov himself, and at that time also Steve Witkoff, who was present at these negotiations between the Russian and American delegations, and now the former assistant to the President of the United States for National Security Affairs, Michael Owens. Rubio now stands in for both Owens and, you could say, Witkoff, who also hardly appears on the Russian-American track anymore, obviously after his trips to see Putin and handshakes with the Russian president failed to yield any real results that Donald Trump had hoped for. All that remains is to understand exactly what this new approach is that Russia has chosen in order to present its supposed constructiveness to the United States. But it's clear that we will find out about this soon enough. Thank you, friends. Stay tuned to this channel, subscribe to it, follow me on my social media, and on Patreon, buy me a coffee and Donatella, which help support the development of this channel. Make use of the sponsorship feature right here on YouTube. Wishing you victory and peace. Good luck.